All right, so I'll give you 30 seconds for that to arrive. And then we'll jump in. These modern times are almost too much to believe, actually.
Yeah, there it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank
Here
you.
we are. Here we are all in one class, literally stretched almost around the globe.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
It's amazing. And then I can pass out papers with the push of a button, and too much, just too much.
Okay, thank you.
Probably the only one here who's not amazed would be Craig.
I'm amazed.
He's the only one even remotely young enough to not
Right.
remember the day when if you wanted something, you had to go get it. When you actually had to take a class on how to find information at the library. Remember that?
Yeah, remember that? Oh my gosh.
Remember when Siri's name was Mom?
Mhm.
Mom? All right, let's jump in now. Of course, Brother Lawrence, we follow him and we're learning from him because of his amazing relationship with the divine, that through constant effort on his part to keep the beloved in his mind, in his awareness at all times, literally all times through the day, not a broken chain at all. His goal and dedication was to have the constant remembrance of the presence of the divine and to live in that light. And he said after 15 years of practice that he had developed such an intense bliss from the presence of God, not from a belief in the presence of God, not from the idea of God, but from his own experience of the presence of the beloved. His communication and communion with the divine in life took such a deep root in himself that he had to devise ways of bringing himself down a little bit because he was in ecstasy so much of the time. He was so full of joy and so full of bliss that it was causing him problems in the monastery, getting a little bit more attention than what he wanted. And he had to devise ways of not being so happy. So I wanted nothing more than to have that same problem. And I would like for all of us to have that same problem. And so
Right.
here we are studying our brother, and we've already read all of his letters and some of the things written about him. And now we're going to touch on his spiritual maxims. So these are kind of a boiled down, crystallized version of what was in the letters, where he just states it in a matter of fact sort of way. So these are his shlokas, his divine shlokas. So the first one's not numbered number one in my PDF. It just begins. All things are possible to him who believes, less difficult to him who hopes, still less difficult to him who loves,
Mhm.
and easiest of all to him who practices and perseveres in all three of these virtues. So, but this faith, this hope, and this love, these are the three divine qualities that he says were the most important in himself to transport him into this relationship with the divine, to touching the meaning of life, touching the possibility of human existence, the highest ideal of it. And so this idea of believing, of just having faith, faith, as we talked about last week, it's not believing something for no reason. It's not that. It's the same reason you go to calculus class. At the beginning of the semester, you don't know anything about calculus. After the first couple of classes, you're not even sure that there could be such a thing as calculus. It seems like such a crazy idea. And by the end of the semester, you know calculus, potentially. And it's because of faith that you stayed in the class. It's because of faith that you took the class and trusted your teacher was going to be able to give you something or teach you something called calculus. So that is faith, and that's how we're going to use that word. In Vedanta, we have no use for just believing something blindly with no evidence. That the Vedanta does not really care at all what you believe. They care much more about your experience and what you know through experience, what you have touched. And so in the Vedanta, there's no requirement of believing anything in particular. Vedanta is a set of tools for us to come to our own realization, because the realization of God, the knowledge of the divine, this relationship that we're studying with Brother Lawrence, is not something you can show somebody. It's a subjective experience. It happens within yourself, with the divine within yourself. And so the only laboratory available where you can demonstrate this is the laboratory of the human heart, the human condition. And so the sages have been kind enough to write down what they've practiced and what they've studied and what they've known, and how they went about finding this relationship with God, with the divine, how they came to experience it. And so Brother Lawrence here is telling us the first one is to believe that it's possible, not because it's an empty belief built on nothing, but because he has done it. And he has had this experience, this divine bliss of being in the presence of God. So we're studying this in a faith that it can be learned and that we can touch the divine firsthand as an experience, as a reality in life. The second is to hope. Oh, what a beautiful idea that is, to have hope that that you can do this. Because that's one of the biggest struggles in spiritual life, is because of our constant failures, it seems, or we lose faith in ourselves. Vivekananda says that that's what the true atheist is. The true atheist is not someone who doesn't believe in an external God. A true atheist is one who does not believe in themselves. And so in our struggle to not be atheistic toward ourself, toward knowing that divine quality that's within, knowing the divine nature that's our own, we have a hope that we can do this. And we share that hope together, which is why we do this crazy get together and to read these beautiful scriptures and to just spend time in holy company in sharing that hope and sharing that divine possibility. And then, of course, the last one is it's the least difficult to he who loves, because God is love, and he who loves is someone who knows the divine. That the love that a holy person shares is not their own egoistic love that they've developed or that they've managed to manicure through tons of effort. It's a love that manifests purely and naturally to each of us because we're created in that image of the divine, according to the path that Brother Lawrence is following, that we are a manifestation of God. And I've always loved Ramakrishna's definition of himself, that he's a whole through which God can be seen. So that's our ideal. We all want to be wholes through which God can be seen, which means that we have to get rid of this ego, this mixture of me and mine that we've put into our pot, our minds, that we connect to everything. We connect me and mine to our body, we connect it to our mind, and we connect it to all the objects in our mind. So, and that breeds this ego, this small self, this limited and restricted image of God that we then put our name on and live according to the needs of the body and according to the needs of the mind. And we're trying to break out of that so that we can have the greatest of all virtues, and that is to be a conduit of pure and unconditioned love, direct from the source, direct from the beloved, from the image within. So, and it's the least difficult for someone who practices all three of these. So you practice your belief that yes, I can learn this here, it is possible. Then you have hope. You trust in yourself. I can do this practice. I can discipline myself. I can, do whatever little things I need to do during the day in order to keep myself mindful. And you're working on love, on stepping out of the way of the divine self that you are, not letting it get stopped by ideas of me and mine that are small and limiting. And he says, all those who are baptized and hold the faith have taken the first step on the road to perfection. So all of us who have stepped into spiritual life as a purpose, accepted spiritual life as something that we long for, that we desire for, that we have taken our first step to this road of perfection and may become perfect to the extent that they persevere according to the following counsel. All right. So this is a perseverance game. That's one of the things that we learn, is that the hardest part of spiritual life is the beginning. And unfortunately, the beginning is about 99% of spiritual life. So here we struggle on, and we sometimes have to go years. I know from my from my own experience, we have to go years without anything sometimes. Or sometimes the Divine Mother is very kind up front, and she'll give you some wonderful little experience or some wonderful little indication that she's present, that it's real, that it's possible. And then she hides for 20 years.
30 years.
30 years, 40 years, maybe. The amazing thing is even Saint Teresa, Sister Teresa, the saint from Calcutta, even in her memoirs that were published after she passed, her diaries, even she says that she wandered in the desert of relationship with God for most of her life. So, yeah, it's phenomenal, especially because she lived such a dedicated life, even in spite of not feeling any inward inspiration. She says, that's beautiful. That's phenomenal. And why do you think the Divine Mother of God, or that, may make it this way? Why do you think Mother doesn't come and dance for us, or come and, give us a daily dose of her physical company? I one time was complaining about this to the Mother in the shrine, as I often am, actually. I'm surprised a giant foot hasn't come out of the sky to squash me at points in my life. But anyway, I had this question and I meditated on it one time in the shrine. I went to Mother and said, "Why? I want to know why." Mother was very kind to me at the beginning. I had that beautiful entrance into the monastery, and then there was nothing for many years. And I think it was 6 or 8 years into it, where I was sitting there in the shrine, kind of feeling sorry for myself and wondering, why am I doing this? And I went to Mother and I asked her why. And then I went to be quiet, as I often do when I ask a question of God like that. I just go and be quiet, and I just wait for some indication or some answer. And that's part of our faith. I'm not going to say that God talks to me directly, but I will say that things occur to me in my mind that don't naturally occur to me in my mind. And I blame them on the divine. I blame them on Mother or God. And so I asked this question. I said, why have you not appeared or given anything? Why are you so silent? And the answer that came to me is, she said, Vance, which is my given name. She said, Vance, you are going through your senses for everything. You're going through your senses for your enjoyments. You're going through your senses for your pleasures. You're going through your senses for your goals and your aspirations. She said, I'm not to be found through the senses. I'm behind your senses. I'm behind you. If I appear to you in your senses, through your eyes or through your ears or through touch, and then when I stop appearing, you're going to think that you have to go looking for me there. I'm not there. I'm here always. Trust that and know that. And seek me here, in the inner space, behind your mind, behind your heart, behind yourself, your ego. And that's where I'll always be. And so this is what we have to know, that this silence of God is not a punishment. It's not God refusing to show himself or herself to us, because God is everywhere present and always perfect. You have never seen anything but God. You've broken her into objects. You've the pleasure that you've gotten from that glass of orange juice, you've blamed on the orange juice and not on the presence of God in the orange juice. And so we're stuck in that sense. And so the Divine Mother, out of mercy, hides herself behind those things deep within us, because she is of the nature of immortality and of the nature of forever. So she's not like things of the senses where it comes and it goes, it lives and it dies. This is something that never leaves you. It is that very part of you that is you, but it's the unchanging part of you. And that's what we're always trying to find within ourselves. That part of us that has not changed in all the years that we've been living and growing and thinking. That which is unchanging alone is real, Sri Ramakrishna tells us. So it's having faith in this, having hope in ourselves, and loving, practicing love in all areas, in all aspects. That, in conjunction with what he's going to share with us, he says, should deliver us at the feet of the divine. So our first maxim, we should refer to God and his glory all that we do and say and undertake, setting before ourselves the task of becoming true worshipers of God in this world, as we hope to be his perfect worshipers in the world to come, and making a strong resolution to overcome by his grace all the difficulties which beset us in spiritual life. So what's he saying here? He said we should refer to God and his glory all that we do. So we do everything for the divine. We talked about that a little bit this morning in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's coming to the knowledge that, one, you are always in the presence of God. And so God is aware even before you are aware. And we've talked about that a little bit. If it were not for the awareness of God, we would have no awareness of our own. Awareness and God are one and the same. Satchit Ananda is the nature of the self, the soul. And the soul, the Satchit Ananda, that's love, wisdom, and existence. So our existence is borrowed from God. If you exist, if you know that you exist, you can know that you and God are intimately bonded, intimately together, because it is his existence that you are experiencing. If you feel any love or recognize love at all around you or in yourself, you can know that the beloved is manifested, and that God is love, and that love is your love letter, that his presence or her presence is intimate with you and deep within you. And if you are able to understand anything that goes in your ears, or understand anything that comes into your eyes, or understand anything that you touch, that understanding is part of the image of the beloved that he or she or that has planted within you. That is your evidence of your intimacy with the divine. So he says here that because of that, because this is the truth, that we should consciously be aware that everything that we touch is in, of, through, and for the divine, for love. If you want to put a word other than God in there, use the word love. That we should refer everything to love. That we should dig and find that to be our motivation of everything that we do, and everything that we say, and everything that we think. All right. That we should refer to God and his glory in all that we do, say, and undertake, setting before ourselves the task of becoming true worshipers of God in this world. All right, now, true worshiper of God, what is that? A true worshiper of God is someone who has not put up the fence of ego, right? What is the fence of ego? That's that me and mine. We have this idea of a self, and we've got a very carefully guarded little white picket fence around us. And we believe that God is out there, he's out there somewhere, but this is my domain. I get to rule this. The space within my little picket fence of a body is mine. And we fill it with me and mine. We do the things we want to do, that we like to do, that we think we should do. We ask it how it's doing all the time to make sure that the body is fed and clothed and bathed and rested. We pamper the mind to make sure that it gets what it asks for, that it stays in a good mood as much as possible, that it doesn't get tired and whatnot. And we create this sense of self, and we worship that self Look at how tenderly you take a bath in the morning, look how tenderly you brush your teeth and comb your hair and, put on any help that you can get, on your face and on your body and all the things that you're doing to worship this little idol that bears your name. So we are steadfastly trying desperately to make ourselves perfect worshipers, which means that we don't worship ego. We don't worship this little self. We don't pamper it and try and take care of it. We associate it all with God, according to the first part of it, so that while you're in that shower taking your bath, you very carefully wash God's hair, very consciously thinking of the divine as you wash your hair. You very consciously wash God's body, take care of this thing. He has created it, he has grown it, and he has allowed you to inhabit it and to enjoy it. So you wash it and you take care of it and you nurture it because it is of the divine. And the same way when you're eating, as you're putting food in this mouth, you're not sitting there thinking, do I like this? Do I not like this? You're putting that food in your mouth. You're offering it literally as you're chewing it and swallowing it. You're offering it to the idea of the beloved within. Here, taco, or have another bite of mashed potatoes. Here, taco, or have another bite of spinach, Oh, do you like that? Do you like that, Maharaj? Do you enjoy that? Oh, very good. Here, you can have some more spinach. And these are just gentle and sweet ways of practicing what he's talking about, the elimination of living for ourselves and worshiping ourselves and tending to ourselves, developing this sense of me and mine, which is the cause of ego, which is the only veil that blocks the presence of God from us. And so he's saying here, we have to become perfect worshipers that has no sense of me and mine. When we serve others, we see God in those others as we see God in ourselves. We're not helping, we're worshiping. We have nothing to give. Everything that we have is the divine, right? Everything that we experience is a gift of the divine. It's never ours. If it was ours, we could take it with us when the body dies. But we can't take anything with us because it wasn't ours to begin with. It wasn't real, actually. It was part of the dream of life. And so this is what we're trying to do so that we can be perfect worshipers in the afterlife. Now, of course, Christianity is set up a little different. Vedanta believes that this here and now is the eternal, and that we will experience it according to our knowledge of our nature. And so that there's other places and other things are talked about, but they're not the point. In Vedanta, heavens and hells both exist, but they're temporary places. You go to heaven until you burn through your reward, and then you come right back here again. If you go to hell as a misfortune, you go until your debt is paid, and then you come right back here again. Does that mean we all have to stay here and just just keep coming back to this place? No, the idea is to have a perfect balance. No, nothing good in your account, nothing bad in your account. You have become a whole through which God can be seen, right? And a whole doesn't own anything. An absence of ego does not have a bank account. But as long as we have a sense of I that we attach to a body and a mind, there's karma. And if we've got karma, we come back. We keep coming back until we work it out, until we realize our true nature. So we want to be perfect worshipers in this world and the world to come, and making a strong resolution to overcome. And here's the best part, making a strong resolution to overcome by what? By our manly effort, by our deep dedication and hard work, by the level of purity we attain, by how nice a guy we are, how much we've learned to control our mouth and our tongue and our face and no, obviously not. It is by grace alone that we touch this. God, as says many places in the scriptures, God is not transactional. He's not something you get in response to something you've done. He is not, she is not purchased. And part of that is one, who would want something that you could purchase? But second of all, he's everything. What will you pay for everything with if it's already his or hers? What do you have to offer for yourself? And so it is by grace alone. Now, this is how we build hope. And this is how we build faith. By knowing this, because what this promises us, he says, making a strong resolution to overcome by his grace all the difficulties which beset us in spiritual life. How does grace do that? Well, it gives you permission. It gives you permission. When you go sit in the shrine, it gives you permission to assume the presence of God. It gives you permission to assume this intimacy with the beloved. It gives you permission to lay down all of the things that have distracted you and to not feel like you have to pay for them first, right? It gives you permission to be with God, regardless of your state, regardless of your condition, regardless of your troubles. All these troubles and all of these sins and shortcomings and failings, they do not belong to you. They belong to the body or the mind, and you are neither of those. And so by this grace, you are given permission to set them down for a moment, even if you're attached to them, even if you can't get them to let go of you, if you let go of them, you still have divine permission to be intimate with the beloved. Always. This is the nature of an unconditioned love. But you can only enjoy it if you give yourself permission to leave me and mine behind, to lay down the things that are the veil that prevent you from seeing the divine. So by his grace, we overcome all of the difficulties which beset us in spiritual life. His number 2, we must believe steadfastly that such difficulties are for our own good, that it is God's will that we should be afflicted, that it is according to divine providence that we should be subject to all kinds of conditions, to suffer all kinds of chastening, of woe, and of temptation, for the love of God, and for so long as he pleases. Now, in the Christian scriptures, they don't really have this understanding of why this is true. So they just accept it because of the suffering of Christ, because Christ was willing to take on all of your burdens. And so we, to be like him, should also be willing. But you see, it's more than that, because you and God are not two different things. You are the verb of the divine. God is a noun. God is absolute and unchanging, ever free and always perfect. You are the verb of that, the expression of that, right? And because of that love, because you and God are one, everything is according to love, because God cannot act outside of love. God is love itself. He's not loving. He is love itself. He doesn't exist. He is existence itself, right? He's not intelligent. He is intelligence itself. So God is the absolute. We are the expression. So we get to be loving, we get to be intelligent, and we get to exist. But all of those are merely expressions of this noun of the divine. And so it follows very closely that if that is true, then everything manifesting has to have its root in love. And if it has its root in love, it is for our best, right? So that's one aspect of this thing that he's telling us. The second one is very close to it, but just a slight bit different. That you only suffer when you are holding on to something that's contrary to your nature. Your nature is love and wisdom and existence. Suffering will only come to you if you hold on to things that are not loving, if you hold on to things that are not wise, and if you insist on being something that doesn't have an eternal existence. If you want to hold on to a person as your partner forever, you're going to suffer because partners are not forever. If you want to hold on to the flavor of eggnog, which I have not had my yearly intake of eggnog yet this year. But now eggnog, if you attach to that, it's a terrible bondage to be attached to eggnog, because eggnog is good from here to here. After it gets past that last part of the tongue, it's done. It might as well be water. So if you're attached to eggnog, you've got about 1.5 inches of enjoyment for the rest of your life. That's it. So we don't want to be stuck loving things or holding on to things that are contrary to our nature. And our nature is love, existence, immortal existence, and wisdom. So that's how we know. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj in his book, I Am That, tells us, and I always bring these same things up, but until we realize God, we can't complain about my repetitions. God, that Sri Nisargadatta says all suffering is an invitation for inquiry. Look for attachment. If you're suffering, if your life isn't happy for you, you're attached to something that's contrary to your nature. Look for it, find it, and let go of it, and move on. It's blocking your vision of the divine. So we must believe steadfastly that such difficulties are for our own good, and they are. Mother's hurting us for holding on to something that's hurting us, right? When mother slaps the scissors out of your hand, it's not because she wanted to hurt you. It's because she'd rather have you hurt from a slap from removing scissors than to hurt from having them stuck in your forehead because you fell on them. So it was for your own good. As a child, you may not believe that. Like, Ma, what are you doing slapping me? But that's the only reason that God hurts us or causes us to suffer, is because we're trying to hold on to something that is not in accordance with our own nature, with what we are. That we should be afflicted, that it is according to divine providence, to the will of the divine. Yes, that we should be subject to all kinds of conditions. And indeed we are, and we like it. Oddly enough, we like it. We even like a little bit of suffering. We like the salt and pepper of life as well. And that's why we're here. Quite often we complain about our condition. Oh, why can't I just come to heaven? Why can't I just realize God? Why do Mother Divine says it's because you don't want to. Yes, you're suffering, but you kind of like it. I think about the first time I tasted a cup of coffee. I started crying because I thought my dad was playing a trick on me. It was a Sunday morning, and I remember he made coffee for he and Mom, and they were laying in bed, and I went in and sat between them on the bed, and I wanted a cup of coffee. And so my dad went downstairs and poured me a cup of coffee and brought it up to me, black. I took a sip of that. Oh my God, that was the most horrible thing in the world I'd ever tasted. Mother was trying to tell me at that time, don't drink anymore. But then my dad went down and put milk and sugar in it, and now I've been a coffee addict for 57 years. So 49 years, actually, because I was 8 when that happened. So this is the nature of things, It's like, if things are bitter, let go of them. Don't insist on holding on to them. That first cigarette, remember how it felt. That first cup of coffee, that first hangover, those were all the Divine Mother right there telling you, you won't find me down here. Don't go down this path. So pay attention to the pain of life. Pay attention to your suffering and learn from it. And you'll find freedom at the end of it. Subject to all kinds of suffering, all kinds of chastening, of woe and temptation, for the love of God, and for so long as he pleases, there can be no true devotion and perfection without such submission of the heart and mind to the will of God. Yeah, so there can't be anything real without a surrendering to the will of God. Who's God that we should have to surrender to him? God is that very image of yourself. It's your highest ideal. God is what you've always wanted to be. Perfected in love, perfected in wisdom, immortal. So yes, from our perspective, because we have this little white picket fence of ego that we've protected around ourselves, where I'm king of this area right here, God, you can rule over there. I'm going to take it on in this area. This area is where we do what we want to do. But if you can submit At the beginning, it looks like you're submitting to a third party, that you have to do what the big bad guy in the sky tells you to do, otherwise you're in big trouble. And that'll last for a while. But you'll come to realize at some point that God's will is your highest ideal. It's what you would be if you could live up to your own obituary. that it's what you want to be. And so surrender, because ultimately it's a surrender to yourself, to your true nature, to what and who you really are, and not to some third party boogeyman out there who's angry at you. Let go of those ideas as soon as you're able, and know that God is your very own. And that by surrendering to your highest self, to your best ideals, you will find your joy and bliss and your immortality. Without it, there can be no true devotion, no perfection, without such a submission of heart and mind to the will of God. Number 3, the greater the perfection to which a soul aspires. That's a tough beginning, because all of us aspire to the highest perfection, right? None of us are in this for mediocre. We don't want just a little bit of bliss. We're looking for total absorption here, total immortality. The greater the perfection to which a soul aspires, the more dependent is she upon divine grace. Ooh, wonderful. Do you see that? Grace is the way. Grace isn't just how the doors of heaven are going to be opened, as such, big quotes, but grace is the very means for that heavenly experience now, right? Because grace in the beginning is your permission, but as you begin to understand it, it becomes your engine. It becomes your motivation. It becomes that which you live in response to. And at that point, you live in response to the world and not reaction to the world, right? It's no longer defensive. It's inspirational. You live not by what you need to do to get what you want to get, but you live spontaneously in the moment as an active verb to this noun of pure love, of pure bliss, of pure existence that is within you and has been covered up with the dirt of ego for so long. Now, finally, you're free. Now, finally, you can let go. And you can let go to the degree that you believe you are nothing. Ooh, why did I ruin it? To that degree, right? Because grace is infinite. What does it take to accept an infinite gift? It takes an infinite humility. See, that's the requirement of grace, and that's what grace trains in us. Through grace, we come to understand that we are imaginary. That this ego was never really a separate person, that we were never really separate and apart from the whole, that we really were never temporary, that we were never born, and that we will never die. We come to know this through grace. It's grace that invites us, gets us interested at the beginning, then it becomes grace that motivates us, and then ultimately it becomes grace that is everything, because we know that anything we thought we could scrounge together to pay for anything was a gift already from itself, right? So the ultimate truth is one without a second. Where will you go to get something else? So this is where divine grace brings us, right? This is where divine grace brings us. So the greater the perfection to which a soul aspires, the more dependent is she upon divine grace. So think about that in your day. You know, if you're dependent on divine grace, if you're dependent on a medication, you're sure to always take it. If you're dependent on divine grace, you should always be sure to remember it. Not as a mechanism of control or God making you feel guilty. Unfortunately, many of our religions have decided to use grace as a guilt-inducing tool, but it's a guilt-releasing tool. It's not a guilt-inducing tool. You know, grace used properly is inspirational and our highest ideal. So he says, the greater dependent is she upon divine grace, and this grace becomes more necessary every moment, because without it, the soul can do nothing. That's the end game of grace. To show you that you can do nothing. Why? Because there was no necessity for anything. Just be. Just be. Right? The world, the flesh, the devil, all together wage so fierce and unremitting war that without actual grace and humble reliance thereon, the soul would be dragged down in spite of herself. Such dependence seems hard to human nature, but grace makes it acceptable and a refuge. So you see this grace ultimately is everything. And what is grace but pure love manifested? You know, I learned about this idea of grace in a weird way. Actually, when I was a freshman in college, I had a really good friend named Ken Liu. And he was a very, very wealthy man. And we were good friends. And of course, because he was wealthy, he had become accustomed to a certain level of living, you know. So when he wanted to go out to dinner, we didn't just go down to McDonald's or something, you know. We'd go to Shea something or rather, and it would be way too expensive. And he was always like, oh, don't worry about it. I'll cover it. No worries, no problems. You know, ultimately that ruined our friendship because I couldn't accept that kind of grace. Because I couldn't accept this huge debt that I kept incurring by hanging out with him, you know, doing all these expensive things he always wanted to do, even though he was perfectly willing and perfectly happy to do it. In my mind, ultimately, I couldn't accept it. My own ego wouldn't allow me to be the one served all the time. You see, so that's the nature of this grace of the divine. If you're going to hold on to your ego, if you're going to fight for your own identity and for your own way and your own decision, you're not going to be able to accept grace. You're not going to be able to accept that because it demands an infinite humility on your part. And an infinite humility means laying down every notion of me and mine that you have, to be willing to lay it down for the sake of other, for the sake of love, right? The world, because everything is conspiring, you know, the Christian devil, we Vedantists would talk about that as egoism. You know, identity with body and mind is responsible for all the things that a Christian attributes to the devil. It's the body and mind and that set of limitations that makes you selfish, because the body wants that last piece of pizza, you know. The mind wants to be in charge of everything in the room, you know. So you know, if you just sit there, if you take any thought as a seed and you just sit there and reminisce about that thought without the idea of the divine in your mind, it goes all the way down. It will always end up with you thinking about some form of something or rather that belongs to the body and mind, and that isn't helpful to you. So Holy Mother says the nature of the mind is to go down, just like water runs from top to bottom, falls from up to down. She said that's the nature of mind as well. So if you identify with body and mind as who you are, it's going to take you to the bottom. It's going to take you all the way down. That's where all these addictions come from, you know, these things that after a while, at first, it seems like we're choosing them, but at the end, we can't get away from them. They have owned us. So he's warning us. The flesh, the devil together wage so fierce and unintermitting a war that without actual grace and a humble reliance thereon, the soul will be dragged down in spite of herself. Such dependence seems hard to human nature, a dependence on grace. But grace, that which you're being dependent on, will also make it acceptable and make it a refuge, because grace that's freely given by necessity demands nothing of you. And when you realize that you don't have to lose anything by accepting grace, that you only have to know something, which is to know that your nature is divine, that you and God are not separate and apart, you're not different. There is no separation between you and anything, that it's one without a second. Grace makes it acceptable to surrender. And that surrendering leads you to refuge, where you can know you can go and grab this warm blanket in mother's lap anytime that you need it. And with practice, you come to know how dependable it is. You know, at the beginning, I can tell you most of this stuff is just imagination. In the beginning, you know, God is an idea. Grace is an idea. Religion is a philosophy, you know, a set of creeds and dogmas. But as you go down this road, you begin to realize that what you've thought is what you've become. And you realize that everything material begins in the imagination and manifests. And so you hold this idea of the divine, and it takes hold, it becomes real. You take the idea of God, and that's all you need. Give mother those 2 fingers in the door, she'll get in. You know, that's the idea behind that mantra, the seed mantra that we were given by our gurus for our spiritual practice. It's guaranteed. Once you have spoken that mantra even once, it's over for you. You have no hope of maintaining your ego, you know, for much more than this life, if even all the way to the end of this one. That mantra, that name of God, makes it inevitable that you will see her and know her. All right. We'll do one more. These are the maxims that are necessary practices for attaining the spiritual life. Number 1, the most holy, the most general, and the most necessary practice in spiritual life is the practice of the presence of God, whereby the soul finds her joy and contentment in his companionship, talking humbly and lovingly to him always and at all times, without rule or system, but particularly in moments of temptation, of trouble, of spiritual dryness, or of revulsion, and especially when we fall into unfaithfulness and sin. So the most important thing for the spiritual life is this practice of the presence of God, that you have to talk to him all the time. Now, we think that that seems unnatural in some way, but I want you to ask yourself a question. When you think, when you think, who is it that is watching your thinking? If right now you say something to yourself, are you 2 people? Are you the one speaking or are you the one listening? To practice the presence of God is to know that everything that you think or say is being thought or said to God, and that is the true you. But until you give up the idea of thinking, until you give up the idea of doing, you can't tell the difference. And you remain 2 people, and the world remains relational because it's 2 people living in you, and you have broken yourself in half, the speaker in the mind and the listener in the heart, when in fact you were always only the listener, and the mind was just a reflection of that you. And so this practice of the presence of God is coming to that level of subtlety, that level of awareness about who you are, to know that which is listening to your thoughts, that which is asking you questions about God, that which is looking for any of these things, is the divine herself. It is God. And if you can let go of the story of thought as being who you are, That is what realization is. Realization is when the whole world settles down and you realize that you are the eternal witness, and that all of this is a play of mind, dancing for you. All right. So it's just about 8 o'clock. Anybody have a question or a comment or a idea, a thought?
I think Grace joined us. There was 7 people now. So we
Yes,
talked
great.
about grace. Yeah.
And here Grace is.
And
What,
here Grace is.
what an auspicious thing.
Yeah.
Hello, Grace. What a wonderful thing. We've learned tonight that you are absolutely fundamentally necessary to everything.
Amazing.
What a delight. Where are you tuning in from?
From Los Angeles. I got the time mixed up. So I guess you're just finishing now. I thought you were about to.
I'm
But
sorry.
next
Yes.
week.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. No, I'm in Colorado, so all
Yeah.
the times are in mountain time.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
But this will be up. This will be up on the whole class will be up on the web by the morning.
Oh,
So if
excellent.
you want to tune in and watch it at that time, that'll work. So we did the maxims
I think
tonight.
there's a question in the chat.
Oh, I don't even see the chat. Let me see just a minute. Wait, I can figure this out. There we go. How to understand that even we feel grace as being happening in a specific moment in our life. Those moments are just proof of the ever-flowing stream. No. I love that. I love that statement. Those moments, first of all, you've never seen more than one moment, because the moment that you're experiencing right now is the only moment you've ever experienced. It doesn't end and it doesn't begin. So the fact that you can think that there is a flow is evidence that you have a mind that is recording the moment. And the fact that you see change is because you look at the mind and then you look back at the moment and they seem different to you. So not only is the mind recording, it's a poor recorder. It can never see the moment as it is. It always sees the moment based on the story that it's telling, based on the collection of ideas that you've held on to as to what and who you are. And that's called your attachments. And those attachments are what create your sense of history, your sense of past. You have seen things pass or seen things in the moment that you didn't want to be temporary. And so you grabbed those temporary things from the moment and you tried to share your immortality with them by placing them in memory. And what they did was they left an imprint. It's like putting a lens over your eyes. And so the more lenses you put over your eyes, the less of what is you can see. You know, put on purple glasses, everything is purple. So what you put in your mind, what you hold on to, the things that you attach to, will determine how you experience the present moment. And until you are willing to let go of everything called me and mine, you won't see God, because the mind won't let you. You will see objects of desires. You will see memories. You will see people and things that you've identified as yourself. If you identify yourself as a body, then you assume everybody is a body. You see a body, you will see someone else. But as soon as you come to understand that you are the dreamer and not the dreamed, you know, if you're in the dream and you know it's a dream, all you see is the dream. And you're fearless. You can do anything you want. You're free of the dream. But as long as you believe that you're a player in the dream, then you are stuck to suffer the dream, whatever it brings to you. If someone's chasing you, you'll run, right? And we've talked about that. So this moment is eternal. This moment is the same moment that Jesus inhabited, the same moment that Krishna danced with the gopis in, the same moment. And from this moment came all of the world's scriptures. And so from this moment, they come to you as well. You can sit down and write the Bible, write the Quran, write the, get myself in trouble with somebody here, but you can write all of these aphorisms and all of this knowledge because they did it from this exact same moment. This moment is God. And if you have eyes to see and a heart to understand, you can distill this moment into text as wisdom literature. But if you see this moment as you, as a small and limited self, maybe you can eke out a good poem. Maybe you can eke out a good book, but you won't be able to write the scriptures. So we feel this grace because it's what gives us life. God's graciousness to us manifests in the fact that he shares his existence. So we enjoy existing. Because of the grace of God, she shares her love. And so we know love. We know it when we see it. We know it when we express it. We know it when we feel it, even though we never got a certificate in understanding and knowing love. You know, and wisdom is the sign of grace. You know, the fact that you understand what I'm saying right now. How were you able to learn words and thoughts? Because God is intelligence itself, and by grace has loaned you the ability to understand, to use that knowledge, that intelligence, to create the world that you live in. So this is how we know grace. There is one moment and one moment only, but infinite copies of it in our mind. But the moment is always fresh and always new, and actually in the moment it's always unchanging. There is no change in the moment. It's like individual frames in a movie. There's actually no change in a movie. There's no movement in a movie. But it's when you take one frame and compare it to the previous one, the mind will fill in the missing link, which is movement, which is action. And your mind is doing that with life as well. It's seeing what is only God and creating it in frames, seeing it partially and improperly, and inferring movement and change. And the ego is collecting a story and has convinced you that you are that story. That's called karma. And until you know how and why to let go of that story, you're in the dream and you must suffer the dream.
Swami, I'm having some difficulty with the devil with the capital D in
Yes.
number 3. How are you reconciling that with your own Vedanta perspective?
Well, see, all the religions are looking at the same reality and coming up with their own paradigm to describe it. So the devil in the paradigm of Christianity would be the lower self, would be the mind-body complex.
Okay.
For us. It would be ego in the short
Okay,
run.
that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what they attribute to the devil, we attribute to ego.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and ego will take you down. Ego is
Mhm.
always trying. Ego is a funny creature because it has no existence. It's not real. There's nothing
Mhm.
there. And so because of that, if you believe in it, if you believe ego, this small self, to be real, then you've basically subjected yourself to eternal insecurity, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Mhm.
what's going to happen is that you're going to try and manifest through ego, which is this material world. You're going to try and manifest the qualities of God in this material world. So in yourself, you're eternally secure. So you're going to try and collect things that mirror or reflect security in this world.
Yeah.
There's pure love here.
Mhm.
So you're going to try and manifest or hold on to things that are the idea of pure love in the world, even though the world is purely transactional. You know, same thing with wisdom, same thing, you're all powerful.
Mhm.
And so you're going to try and manifest ultimate power in the world. That's why we never have enough, because we're trying to paint an immortal, infinite self in a limited and restricted world. We're trying to paint on a canvas the story of life, and it's not going well. So we're struggling. We're suffering our way through it. So when they say the
Thank
devil, then that's really all they're doing in their paradigm. That's how it's broken up.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
surely. Cool.
Mm.
Is that everything? All right. Well, I'm glad everybody was here. You know, Jose, Craig, Grace. Nice. It's all three of you here for the first time tonight. It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
It's
So we'll
wonderful,
do this
yeah.
again. We'll do this again next week. And if you ever need to know what's going on or what classes are happening, onespirit.center has a list of everything going on. We're going to start a new class a week from Monday.
So that'll be
Probably
the 16th, Swami, the 16th.
the 16th, okay?
Okay.
Probably at 4 p.m. on Monday afternoons. We're going to be doing a series called Art and Spirit, where we kind of use works of doesn't have to be modern art, it'll be whatever kind of art, but it'll be artistic endeavors. We'll use them as kind of a method of seeing the divine, of seeing God, of talking about philosophical and spiritual truths or ideas. And so be there for that if you want. All right. So you all know my email address.
Thank you,
If you ever
Maharaj.
want to
Thank you,
email me
Maharaj.
for anything or need anything, just feel free to let me know. I'm yours.
And
So
you're
be
going to
well.
update your website, right, Swami, with all this?
Yes, the site's updated, and this recording tonight will also be there, probably by early morning anyway. I may wait till the morning to do it, but by early morning. All right.
Thank
So
you.
very good to see you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jai
Maharaj.
Ma,
Good
Jai
night.
Thakur, Jai Swamiji,
you,
Jai
Swami.
Jesus, Jai
Ram.
Moses,
Thank
Jai
you,
Allah,
Maharaj.
Jai Ma.